Okay, I'm gonna show you one here and tell you the amazing story about how one fart may have killed 10,000 people in ancient Jerusalem. Now, I was holding off on this a little bit, and I do want to every once in a while put out something that's a little lighter. But then again, this, if you really get into the reality of it, it isn't that light, and the things that I can add to it aren't that much either, which I'm going to do anyhow. And it's really not April Fool's worthy or something because it's actually based on reality. What we're having here is seemingly a conflagration of two points in history, probably about 650 years apart, and it's put together for this story that's here. And you may or may not have heard of it, but it's somewhat interesting, and I'll try to add enough to it to keep it interesting for you here. It says a single fart caused the deaths of 10,000 people back in ancient Jerusalem. That's according to one Roman historian, they call him Roman, who wrote that a poorly timed fart was responsible for a deadly riot 2,500 years ago. It's about 500 BC. And so when we look back then, what's supposed to have happened is that Babylonia takes these people into captivity and then they come back out. But also, notice how it's depicted and it says that they revolted, right? And watch the narrative as it goes through here, and I'll try to clarify and see if you can see it. This is a depiction of Jerusalem, but it's believed that this is a little bit fancy version of what it would have been around the time of Jesus, if you will, and Titus, just shortly before his wall and when everything was a problem. So, like, you could look at that and say, this is what your city looked like before we smote it all the way down, and your temple too, in what we know of as Armageddon. Although people are led to believe Armageddon could be coming anytime, it's actually then. And I'll try to go into that. Let's see if I can get through this fairly quickly. Flavius Josephus chronicled the history of the Jewish war against the Romans in his book Wars of the Jews, published around 75 AD. Now, it had just ended in 73 AD and began in 66 AD. And so there's the 7 years of trials and tribulation. And it started supposedly in the year 66 AD, on the 6 months, on the sixth day, and 666, for those who have wisdom, count the number, and so on. And I think, in fact, I'm positive that people were supposed to figure this out a whole long time ago. And the person that rode in on the white horse and everything that has to do with it are the Romans. And it was pretty much Armageddon for them. But see, Armageddon is not what you even think it is, for it's named after a mountaintop, Har Megiddo. And really, the concept of this revelation means a lifting of a veil type situation, tearing and lifting of a veil. And if you find in the story, the veil gets ripped and opened, and what's in there? God's supposed to be in there the whole time, da 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 da, and it's like nothing, right? So let's get into this though, because this is supposed to be a story about a fart, how it causes an extreme problem. This is what it's blamed on. An action. See if you can see if it warrants this action, and if there's not a lot more to the story, but here it goes. In the Wars of the Jews, he describes a bonkers tale in which a toot from a soldier triggered a revolt against Jerusalem's rulers. Well, that wouldn't be true if you know the fact of the thing. Herod and all those people ruling, and before then, they were always under somebody else. Now, this is said to be Roman times when it's coming at you, but isn't this even into the Greek times of it? And we're kind of cutting two different things. We're talking about 500 and 600 BC, and then a much later account. Anyhow, in Jerusalem between 600 and 500 BC, a cohort of heavily armed Roman soldiers were guarding a temple during the celebration of Passover. Josephus writes in his book 2, chapter 11 of Wars of the Jews, that the Romans, who held control of Jerusalem at the time, so see, everybody's thinking like it's this island of thing or whatever, but it never was. It was under Egypt, and it was under Persia, it was under Greece, it was under Rome, There was never this, what you might think that it is. The Romans who held control of Jerusalem at this time apparently always kept guard at festivals to prevent any disturbances. Well, this is like the police around nowadays and everything, and we still understand that concept and stuff. And at festivals, there's going to be placed around guards and things like that just to make sure somebody doesn't go foolish. Phew! Somebody tooted and it wasn't me. A vulgar Roman guard is said to have farted at a crowd of worshippers in Jerusalem, sparking a riot in the 6th century BC, leading to the downfall of them. And supposedly, in a weird midrash way, I guess we're supposed to believe that made it easily for Babylonians just to come in and take them. This was everything that happened from this fart. But let's continue. According to Josephus, one of the soldiers pulled back his garment and, cowering down after an indecent manner, turned his breech to the Jews. The vulgar guard then spake such words as you might expect upon a posture. Now we believe that what he did was he pulled down his pants and farted, and he thinks, well, no, they were wearing kilts. So he really pulled back his garment there, squatted down, cowering down after he squatted, and supposed to be farted, but spake such words as you might expect, and I guess you might expect a fart to come from that, but I think he told them to kiss his ass or something. So who knows what crap went on. Now, why is he telling someone to kiss his ass? Probably because they were talking crap to him, because there's a crowd of revelers there, and they're like acting out of manner of sorts. It's indicated in there, so, but you're never going to mention that part. It's like when they do the little clip and they say, oh, look, it was all his fault, and they're like, roll that all the way back. No, back to the way that, okay, look, out of nowhere, he comes up and he does this. This guy tries to stop him, and then he whoops his ass. Oh, so now whose fault is this? It's one of those kind of things, but that also works in 66 AD. Let's continue. While it's not clear exactly what Josephus meant by this, some have read in his comments to mean that the soldier farted at the crowd. I disagreed whenever I read it, and I probably told him to kiss his ass, tongue punch my fartbacks, whatever, like I try to say sometimes. Whatever he did, the indignation of it all sparked a riot as members of the public attempted to attack the offending Romans. Reinforcements were called, and the crowd became a crush. The violence which, he's quoting, the violence with which they crowded to get out was so great that they trod upon each other. So, a trampled crowd, right? So, shit kicked off in a fight, or the Roman did something, they threw a tomato at him and it was on. It was like, look, guy, and then everybody went running for it as the guards started coming after him. And they trampled each other, something along that line. You can try to get a mental picture of it. They squeezed one another till 10,000 of them were killed. Josephus' account depicts a time of serious unrest in ancient Jerusalem. He wrote his account of a few hundred years after the event is supposed to have taken place, so take it with a pinch of salt. And albeit that maybe something like that, and he would have had privy to the knowledge of that's how it went down, I wouldn't think it was a fart. I would think he told them to kiss their ass or whatever off of it, and I would think that there was a reason. He wouldn't just out of nowhere be doing this type of thing. And you can try to justify it back and forth and everything, and now when people are all in the Bible, they're all like, oh, I hate them Romans because they did da-da-da, and it's like, who's the instigator? And like, just over and over again. Well, they were under them, so no wonder they were going to revolt. Yeah, and they were waiting for Emmanuel that never came, because Jesus came all calmed down, and he was like doing to the Romans. In fact, he said the second coming's coming at the Mount of Olives, right there to his guys. And he said, some of you still standing here right now will be alive when this happens. Verily I say to you, straightforward. So a generation is 40 years. He died in 33, and in 73 AD, kapow. And he mentioned at the first of this that that's a Roman historian. Well, no, it's really supposed to be Jewish historian, isn't it? Or is it? Because you see one picture of him, and he looks like he's got a sultan cap on and all kinds of stuff, which is really out of flavor, unless he had something to do with Persia. But then all of a sudden the other account shows him with a Roman hook nose and looking like Caesarish. And boy, the way they took him in out of nowhere. Another weird thing that you have to get by if you ever study Josephus and stuff is his telling of his own account tries to do something like a Jesus deal, and said that he was marveling people in the temples whenever he was young and stuff, and also how he was saved for the Romans instead of being killed by them was there was a group inside of a cave, and what they did was they drew lots, and the one that got the unlucky lot killed the person next to him. And just out of a luck of the draw, he was the only one left with one other guy, and they decided that they weren't going to kill each other, and they grabbed him. But then Josephus said, well, oh, I'm a seer, and I say that Titus is, or Vespasian was supposed to be emperor, and da-da-da. And he liked that so much, he turned around and gave him a room in his house and made him the historian of the Jews. And it's like, you know, there's a lot missing in that situation. There's a lot missing in that situation. We'll get into it and talk about the 144,000 and how that really is a number that correlates with sacred geometry when we get into that, and how long a mile is and an inch and a foot and things, and how they were all kept before a modern day. And everybody tried to get people to go metric system, and there's a group of people that didn't want to do it, for they know that this measuring had been around before, long before. And I'll show that to you, and how that hooks up, and how D&D dice, you know, how they're different shapes and stuff, how that has to do with it all too, and spirographs and geometry and things that led people to a truth way back when that we still use in architecture, drawing, the way you lay out somebody's face on paper, all of those things. So he tells you, as with any word of mouth account, keep in mind that the numbers may be exaggerated. So it may be just 6,000 people that got done. Jews are known for exaggerating numbers, you know, all the way through the Bible and things, and then in their accounts of how many people died in World War II and so on. The previous version of this article made erroneous reference to ancient Egypt. Yeah, see, I told you I saw one about that. Hey, look at this. Here's a fart pad. It's got charcoal in it. You put it in your panties, and when you fart, it makes it not stink so much. Isn't that hilarious? So King Tut's tomb, ancient Chinese people gave their babies cone heads. I wonder what I should look up onto that. Wild. Learn to speak Spanish in a week. So did it end right there? Maybe it did. Usually they have the account and the things at the end of it. I'm sorry. Online at the Sun. Is there something down here? Buffalo. And then it just goes to comments. So, oh yeah, what they comment anything? Didn't know. Just kind of, hey. Did I miss the comments now? Guess I did. Irregardless, people. So there's another part to this story that happens some 600 years difference, and who knows, coming up shortly maybe I'll tell you the other half of it, and I'll go, remember that fart story? And by the way, you put two and two together and you can kind of figure out a mode for things and what was said and what it's done. But they call him a Roman historian, huh? Peace.